Good afternoon and welcome to the San Francisco Planning Commission regular hearing for Thursday, October 13th, 2016. I'd like to remind members of the public that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence your mobile devices that may sound off during these proceedings. And when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Fong.
Here.
Commission Vice President Richards.
Here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
And Commissioner Moore.
Here.
We do expect Commissioner Hillis, Johnson, and Melgar to arrive shortly. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. Item 1 for case number 2013.1049E at 950 through 974 Market Street. Preliminary mitigated negative declaration is proposed for continuance to November 3rd, 2016. Item 2 for case number 2014-001965. PCA Article 7, Phase 2 of the Code Reorganization and Simplification Project. Planning Code Amendment is proposed for continuance to November 17th, 2016. Item 3 for case number 2015-002135. CUA at 854 Cap Street Conditional Use Authorization is proposed for continuance to December 8th, 2016. Item 4 for case number 2014.0964 ENX. At 1228 Folsom Street, large project authorization is proposed for continuance to January 5th, 2017. Item 5 for case number 2015-004279 CUA at 412 Broadway Street, conditional use authorization is proposed for indefinite continuance, as is item 6 for case number 2015-005127 CUA at 391 Broadway Street, conditional use authorization. Commissioners, I am pleased to announce that under your discretionary review calendar, item 13 for case number 2015-01474, 9 DRP at 3630 Jackson Street discretionary review, that DR has been withdrawn.
Great.
I do have one speaker card for 854 Cap Street, but you are only entitled to speak to the matter of continuance at this time.
Okay, is there any public comment on the matters proposed for continuance? Okay, not seeing any public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
Move to continue as proposed, including item 13, which has been independently resolved.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to continue items as proposed, Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 4-0 and places us under
Jonas, I want to just make sure the card that you handed to me was
for 854 Cap
right.
for the continuance calendar, and I announced that it was you can only speak to the matter of continuance. Did you want to still speak to the matter? You can't speak to the.
Okay, sorry. Coming up.
Commissioners, then we'll take item 3 off of the continuance calendar.
Yeah, Commissioners, we were just asking if this would be considered to be the possibility of keeping these two properties joined. This has been the parsonage of the church for over 100 years, and we're asking if this can be a part of the landmark status because of the church having been.
Sir, this is only to the matter of continuance, so I'm not sure if there's a landmark status proposal for the property.
Well, for the church next door, I'm not sure if what's happening on that. Are you asking me if I'm opposing the continuance?
Well, that's all we're considering at the time is whether or not to continue it, to not continue it, or to continue it to a different date.
Okay.
So you're supporting the continuance, correct? And you want further study, investigation on the project? Okay.
Sir, can I ask if you have you been in touch with staff on that issue? Have you talked to the staff planner on that issue?
I have not.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards, and we'll get your information for the staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next item, please.
Commissioners, that'll place us under your consent calendar. The matter listed here under constitutes a consent calendar, is considered to be routine by the Planning Commission, and may be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the Commission. There will be no separate discussion of this item unless a member of the Commission, the public, or staff so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item at this or a future hearing. Item 7, case number 2015-006425 CUA at 755 Ocean Avenue, conditional use authorization and planned unit development.
Okay, is there public comment? Not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Richards.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to approve item 7 under consent, Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Fawn.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. And places us under Commission Matters. Item 8, consideration of adoption draft minutes for September 29th, 2016.
Is there any public comment on draft minutes? Not seeing any public comments closed. And Commissioner Moore.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt the minutes for September 29th, 2016, Commissioner Commissioner Johnson.
Commissioner Johnson.
Say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Fawn.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0 and places us on item 9, Commission comments and questions.
Commissioner Moore.
I wanted to thank the mayor for appointing Elaine Forbes as director of the port. Elaine has been an outstanding planner, moved to the port quite a few years ago, and I couldn't be happier to see her take that role.
Thank you for bringing that up. I concur, and she is going to be a great asset for the port.
Commissioners, if there's nothing further, I would like to request to add your 2017 schedule to a future hearing in the near future as opposed to December when we normally consider it. Your calendars are full through the year and we're into January, and staff is just curious whether or not January 5th will be a hearing date. So maybe next week or the following week we can bring that to you under Commission Matters.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioners, that'll place us under Department Matters, item 10, Director's Announcements.
Thank you, Jonas. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I was also going to congratulate Elaine Forbes and note that she is a proud alumna of the Planning Department, so I'm very pleased to see her in that position. Secondly, Commissioners, I just came from my annual meetings with my counterparts in the 30 largest cities in the country, which is a very fruitful series of discussions that we have back in Cambridge. And what was striking about this year's conversation was how much the issue of income disparity, inequity, and housing prices were the almost uniform issue for all of the cities, even in cities that we would not normally consider to be high-cost cities. Even cities in Texas and the South are experiencing these pressures on parts of their, in some of their neighborhoods, and it's a very curious phenomenon that's happening right now that all cities are experiencing in very big ways, and we're all struggling with how to grapple with this issue. And a close second in terms of our most pressing issues are issues of mobility and transportation. So the kind of key issues that we're facing in San Francisco are being experienced, perhaps not quite as acutely, but are being experienced in many other cities across the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, item 11, review of past events at the Board of Supervisors, Board of Appeals, and the Historic Preservation Commission. There are no reports from any of those committees.
Okay.
Commissioners, that'll place us under general public comment, not to exceed a period of 15 minutes. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes. I have no speaker cards.
Is there any general public comment? Okay, not seeing any general public comments closed.
Very good, Commissioners. That'll place us under your regular calendar for items 12A and B for case numbers 2010.0305 DVA and 2010.0515 DVA, the Sunnydale Hope SF Master Plan Project, and Potrero Hope SF Master Plan Project informational presentations.
I believe we're waiting on
see
staff. Yeah.
Nobody's here. We're breezing through this, so.
Kind of blew through our normal course.
Yeah.
Theo's
This
staff.
You wanna
Where's
wait a
planning
second?
department staff?
I know.
Yeah, let's wait a second and see if,
Great.
Just gotta wait for a few minutes.
I don't believe it is, because I haven't seen Matt.
All right. I'll just.
We'll take a 5-minute.
Commissioner, I think everybody is stuck in traffic, so we'll take a little 5-minute break and let staff arrive.
Thank you.
Thursday, October 13th, 2016. Commissioners, we are going to take your discretionary review calendar out of order. DRP 10 and 2013.1768 DRP-9 at 3516 Folsom Street and 3526 Folsom Street, respectively. Commissioners, you had originally heard this matter on March 3rd of this year, continued to May 5th of this year, where you chose not to take DR and approve the project as proposed. Since that time, the our former ERO determined that the the categorical exemption was not properly before you, and hence voids your previous determination. Because this is essentially the third hearing on the same project with a new categorical exemption, the chair has directed me to limit speaking time for the project sponsor and the DR requesters to a total of 10 minutes each. Public commenters will be provided 1 minute to speak, and there will be a 2-minute rebuttal afforded to both the project sponsor and the DR requesters.
Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rich Sucre, Department staff. The item before you is a request for discretionary review for the building permit applications associated with the new construction of 2 single-family residences at 3516 and 3526 Folsom Street. The proposed projects would be located on 2 vacant lots, each measuring 20 feet by 70 feet in the RH1 zoning district, Bernal Heights Special Use District, and the 40X Heightened Bulk District. Currently, these parcels do not have vehicular access or direct pedestrian access via sidewalks or other street improvements. This portion of Folsom Street is a paper street and is currently not improved. The 2 new single-family residences are both 2 1/2 stories tall with 2 off-street parking spaces. The 2 residences each measure approximately 2,200 gross square feet. As Jonas mentioned, since the last public hearings on March 31st and May 5th, 2016, the Environmental Planning Division rescinded the previous categorical exemption dated March 26, 2014, and published a new categorical exemption dated July 8, 2016. Therefore, the Commission's previous determination on the request for discretionary review have been rescinded, and a new discretionary review hearing is required. To date, the Department has received a number of public comments on the project, both for and against the request for discretionary review. Since the last hearing on May 5th, the Department has received one additional letter from the DR requesters outlining their concerns for the project. The DR requesters have a number of issues with the proposed project, including paving of Folsom Street, emergency and infrastructure access, impacts on the underground PG&E pipeline, future development on vacant lots along this portion of Folsom Street, impact on neighboring residences, on-street parking and construction traffic, compliance with the Bernal Heights East Slope design guidelines, size and scale of the new residences, side yard setback of the new residences, off-street parking, rooftop stair penthouses, public views from Bernal Heights Park, impact on open space, and affordability, among other issues as detailed in the submitted DR applications. Issues surrounding Folsom Street and the PG&E pipeline are not under the purview of the Planning Commission. The Department of Public Works, or DPW, is the responsible agency for guiding and reviewing the extension and/or paving of Folsom Street. As noted in the previous hearings, the Commission directed staff and the project sponsor to undertake additional consultation with other city agencies, including SFPUC, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Building Inspection, and the San Francisco Fire Department. DPW has confirmed that the road layout is feasible and that the project sponsor has submitted a street improvement permit and an associated grading plan. The project sponsor has also continued evolution of the proposed streetscape with DPW and the Planning Department's Streetscape Design Advisory Team, or SDAT. In addition, the project sponsor has revised the design of the north facade in response to previous comments from the Planning Commission. Again, the department affirms its earlier opinion. The projects are located in a residential district and have been reviewed by the Residential Design Team, or RDT. RDT found that the project does not create or possess any extraordinary or exceptional circumstances and did not recommend any changes to the proposed project. The department finds the overall massing, form, scale, and bulk to be appropriate given the underlying zoning and the height and bulk limits. The proposed project is consistent with the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood and meets the requirements of the Bernal Heights East Slope Design Guidelines, the Bernal Heights Special Use District, and the Residential Design Guidelines. The project will add new single-family home on a privately owned vacant lot at the base of Bernal Heights Park. The project does not have any direct impacts on the adjacent Bernal Heights Community Garden or Bernal Heights Park. The project sponsor has revised the garage layout to avoid a variance for parking access. Therefore, the project is fully code-complying project and is not seeking any variances or special entitlements from the planning code. As there appear to be no exceptional or extraordinary circumstances, the department finds the proposal is consistent with the planning code and the Bernal Heights Special Use District and recommends the Commission not take discretionary review and approve the project as proposed. I'm available for any questions, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Commissioners, if I may, at this time also recognize the fact that at the time the previous hearings were heard, Commissioner Koppel and Melgar were not seated as commissioners on the Planning Commission. They have been advised to review the previous hearings, and I believe they have done so. So just for the record.
DR requesters, please.
Good afternoon. First of all, I have to say a number of people aren't here because we thought we were number 14 on an agenda today, and we got moved all the way up. I luckily found somebody who had a prep time during my time at school, so I found her to take over my class. So I'm going to start. We're going to do our best. My name is Kathy Angus. I've lived at 99 Bank Street for 32 years, and I represent the Bernal Heights South Slope organization. I'm totally overwhelmed by the 900 pages of mostly new information that has been submitted or at least made available to us in the last week. And I really doubt that any of us have really been able to truly analyze it in any depth. Those 900 new pages exemplify the complexity of this project, and each part of it affects the whole. I'm assuming you know this process has taken over 2 years and has cost us, the neighbors, tens of thousands of dollars, which has really stretched us thin, and yet here we are again. There are numerous inconsistencies in the new CEQA exemption, ranging from slope measurement to street width to breakover points to height and bulk to PG&E oversight to impacts on public safety and access. My greatest concern is that the CEQA exemption identifies the scope of the project to include the infrastructure for all 6 undeveloped lots. and the street, not just the two under consideration here. And we believe that new street extension has new plans, which we really haven't even looked at, that have been submitted in the past couple weeks. There's no question that the whole project has a far greater impact than is outlined in the CEQA exemption, which only applies to the criteria for 2 lots, without considering the impact for the imminent development of the other 4 lots, many of whom have spoken in favor of this project. In fact, a decision to proceed on this construction then precludes any chance for the whole scope of the site to be assessed. By piecemealing the project and looking at one small piece at a time, there will never be an assessment of the whole impact. Because of these discrepancies in the scope and detail of the project, and because the community concerns have been completely disregarded in the process, we urge you to reconsider this project. First, we request that this project not be approached piecemeal, with no opportunity to study, analyze, or consider the impact of the potential development of the street and the 4 additional homes. And secondly, if in fact you do approve the design and the street is rejected, meaning another kind of walking access will be required, we request that the bulk of the building be reduced significantly by as much as 1 floor, since the garage will no longer be needed. As our documents and my neighbors can attest, this whole project from street to homes creates a serious safety hazard and dangerous precedent for future construction. It's not the situation you see all over the city. The confluence of all the concerns most definitely produce unusual circumstances that, taken as a whole, will without a doubt cause major damage to life and property. Thank you.
Do you have my slide?
Yes.
Commissioners, sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Herb Felsenfeld. I live at 3574 Folsom Street. My wife and I have lived there for over 33 years. I'm here before you to talk about the garage going into our house and how the design of this house that is proposed, the 2 proposed houses, makes our garage inaccessible and unworkable. Before, we were able to park my wife's car in the parking area in front of the garage, and I was able to use the garage for my car, or vice versa. Now, because of the eliminated driveway area and the extreme breakover angle, it is impossible for us to get into our garage. It will be impossible for us to get into our garage. There's between a 34 and 37% grade on this new street. It's a street where we cannot back out of easily, and I don't think we can back out of it at all. And the challenge that I would put to you is, can you tell me how to back my car out of the garage with this new construction that is put forward? I also see a mass of uneven terrain. We are here before you not represented by council because the benefactor that we had who was paying for our lawyer has moved out of the neighborhood, so we're here as a group of very concerned citizens, and I'm frankly terrified of the safety hazard that I'm being put under, and my wife is being put under, and anyone who visits us is being put under with this new construction of the garage. And if I can't get out of my garage, I wonder if the property owners at 3526 and 3516 can get out of their garage. So for the first time living in Bernal Heights, I'm terrified of the situation that is being proposed for us.
We're having some technical difficulties, and I'm hoping we could stop the clock. For some reason, it's not appearing on the screen.
If SF.gov TV can go to the computer, please.
Yes, can we stop the clock, please?
Just let them know that you want to.
It's up.
Yes,
it's up.
Okay, all right. Okay, and could we go to slide 4?
Slide 4, yes.
Okay, yeah, back to slide 4, please. Okay. Yeah, thank you, commissioners. My name is Marilyn Waterman, and my partner and I have a house next to this project site that we share with 2 tenants, Ann and Sam. My part of this presentation today is point out several serious design inaccuracies that inform this DR analysis. We request accurate data be required before a building permit is issued. The first inaccuracy is the public views from Bernal Heights Boulevard. It involves the size and mass of the top house. This is the, can we see the slide, please? No, please back up.
Yep.
Stay there, please. Thank you. And okay, this is a south-facing public view from the Bernal Heights Boulevard sidewalk. The yellow circles mark the top of the story poles. If the slide were panoramic, you would also see a spectacular view of Bernal Valley. It's the last intact view of its kind on the south side. If you walk or jog, push your stroller, ride your bike, roll your wheelchair around Bernal Heights, park using the sidewalk, as thousands do each week, you know this view. Now, the checklist of the DR analysis says, quote, does the building protect major public views from public spaces? The box is checked yes. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is absolutely not true. The revised CEQA determination echoes this inaccuracy. In fact, it states, quote, the proposed roofs of the two buildings sit below the elevation of Bernal Heights Boulevard, unquote. This is a fiction that has gained traction and is now a part of the DR reports and the CEQA determination. It corrupts this report. Another DR checklist question asks, is the stair penthouse designed to minimize its visibility from the street? It is checked with an NA. The elimination of the, quote, penthouse stairwell was meant to appease neighbors who objected to the structure jutting out and blocking a public view. It was replaced with a, quote, parapet stairwell. It also blocks a public view. They got rid of the, quote, penthouse and replaced it with a, quote, parapet, but the end result is still a blocked public view. We had an engineer check the height of this parapet. It's 15 feet above the Bernal Heights grade. I want to point out the project sponsor has experience in presenting plans. We feel our legitimate concerns have consistently not been heard. The DR analysis also answers the following question with a yes. Is it, quote, is the building facade designed to enhance and complement public spaces? We say no. Next slide, please. The computer rendition of the houses consistently misrepresent the houses' incongruence with public spaces and hillside topography. They do this expertly with angles and shadows and aesthetic uses of shrubbery. We provide you with a close-up not found in the packet. These houses are designed to maximize footage. They do not comply with many of San Francisco's general plan urban design elements guidelines, including, quote, promotes the best architectural solutions at locations of public prominence, and, quote, where large parks occur at the top of hills, low-rise buildings surrounding them will preserve views from the park, unquote. I can go on, we're running out of time, but we ask the Commission to resolve these inaccuracies before approving these projects. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Terry Milne. I'm a member of the East Slope Design Review Board, and specifically, the Commission passed our residential design guidelines for the East Slope very specifically about our neighborhood and its design. And our review board has been reviewing projects for the last 20 years using our guidelines. And the reason we ask for discretionary review is because we wish that the planning department would use our very specific guidelines to judge the significant entries, the bulk and architectural massing, and the facades facing Bernal Hill that you've just seen illustrated.
Mr.
That's why
your 10 minutes are up, but you do have a 2-minute rebuttal.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so Jonas, help me. Calling speakers in support of the DR requesters.
That's right. So these are people in support of the DR requester in opposition to the project.
Okay, not.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
public commenters in support of the DR requesters in opposition to the project?
Who haven't already spoken?
And who are not DR requesters, right?
My name is Patricia Hughes, and I'm opposing the idea of building there. I'd like to ask a question, if I may. How many of you have been out to see the space, to see the two buildings that are supposed to be built? Anybody? Has anybody seen it?
Ma'am, you have 45 seconds,
One
and
person.
this isn't a question or answer period. It's just
Okay.
for you to submit public testimony.
All right. I think everybody should see it.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Victor, and I just moved into the neighborhood. I moved from New York City, and what I love about San Francisco is the natural beauty that surrounds us and all of the beautiful parks, which is one of the reasons why we chose Bernal as the right neighborhood for us. And this construction horrifies me for a number of reasons, one of which is it is changing what I love so much about being in this city and a new resident here that I so appreciate. And there are a couple things that I want to go over here that some of my neighbors have touched on, but I'm quickly just going to go through this design review checklist because I'd have to say, I don't know what is going on as well as my neighbors have because I've just moved in, but I will say, even just on a brief review of the documents put before us, there are inaccuracies in the reports, and I believe that they misrepresent, truthfully, they misrepresent what the building will do, how it will look, its size, and the impact that it's going to have on the neighborhood. Does
Thank
the
you,
building
ma'am.
respect the topography?
Ma'am, unfortunately, your time is up.
Yes, I live in the neighborhood now for 10 years. I think the question to ask with the slide of the vista view from Bernal Hill is that you have to understand not only do the locals go to Bernal Hill, but there is a large number of tourism that happens on a daily basis. Tourism is number one in this city, as you know, economically. If you remove that view, that is one part of it, of Bernal Hill that will not be seen again because of these homes. And you can ask yourself, who do these homes benefit? Do they benefit the Bernal community? Do they benefit? Is it a community garden? Is it low-income housing? No, it's not. Okay, it's made for two families that will impact greatly on this hill. By the way, the rest of the hill is owned by the city, as you know. So ask yourself that question: how can this benefit Bernal neighborhood overall? And ask yourself the tourist question, because there's many up there, not just in the front where you see the city skyline, but in the back taking photos on a daily basis, because I live on Ellsworth at Powhatan. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gail Newman, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I understood you correctly. Did you say if I'm a DR person, I can't come up right now?
That's correct.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
But there is a 2-minute rebuttal that you can speak under.
Okay, are any other public comment, any other speakers in support of the DR requesters? Okay, not seeing any. Moving on. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, opening it up to project sponsor.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Fabien Lenoy. I'm the project sponsor for these two houses. I bought one of the two lots, the lot at 3516 Folsom, which I plan to build my house. And it's been almost 3 years that I filed the permits. Since the hearing on May 5th, where the Planning Commission supported the project with a vote from 6-0, we've tried to work on a few items on the project. First item was the Planning Commission had asked that we rework the north facade and the south facade, which we've done, and we've submitted a proposed redesign to the planning department, and it is in the package, where we've tried to add some windows and some interest on the outward-facing uphill and downhill facades, which was a request that the East Slope Design Review Board had asked for. We also have reworked based on the neighbors' comments, who commented that the street width and driveway access were difficult. We've reworked in collaboration with the SDAT, Street Design Advisory Team, and DPW to improve the design based on the layout that had initially been approved. And we were able to get the approval to enlarge a proposed street from 15.5 foot to 19.5 foot, and widen the curb cuts to allow easier turns into the garage, and add stairs on the sidewalk in order to do a better transition from the street to the garage, and something that would be less of a sharp turn and slope going into the garage. We've submitted those revised documents to DPW and to the planning department, and updated the proposed plans, and hopefully you will see that we're going in the right direction. Thank you very much.
President Fong, members of the Commission, Charles Olson from law firm Lubin and Olson, representing the project sponsor. I'll be very brief, as this is indeed the third hearing on this over the last year. I just want to address 2 points. One is the CEQA contention that a categorical exemption is not available for these projects because it would involve 6 residential units, not 3 or less. The only applications in front of the city are the 2 for my clients, the project sponsors. It does clearly qualify for a Class 3 categorical exemption. The reissued categorical exemption is much more robust than the prior one. It does contain a discussion of cumulative impacts that could result in the future if the other lots are developed. But again, the rule in San Francisco is that unless there's an application for environmental review on file, it's not a foreseeable project. The exemption should apply. There's no unusual circumstances in this case. That's covered extensively in the reissued categorical exemption. Just a second point on the driveway and the fact that there are existing driveways. My client has consistently offered to pay for the design and improvement of the existing driveways. It requires the cooperation of the neighbors to do so. They remain willing to do that. It'll be part of the final design for the street. In May, this commission, again with 2 other members and not the 2 new members, voted 6-0 that there were no exceptional circumstances warranting discretionary review. Since that time, the only improvements to the project are the ones that my client just mentioned. They're all favorable, so we would request that the staff recommendation be adopted, and if there are any questions, we're available to answer.
Okay, thank you. Opening up to public comment who are speakers in support of the project sponsor.
Hello, my name is Clarissa Nantes. I live on Folsom Street, just a block and a half down the street. And I believe that this project should go forward. We need homes in Bernal Heights as well as in the city. They have a right to build. I understand that they are trying to work with the neighbors, and I think they should. But I think the neighbors should work with them because I think that they have a right to build.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers in support of the project sponsor? Okay, not seeing any DR requester. You have a 2-minute rebuttal. I'm sorry, 1 minute rebuttal.
2-minute rebuttal.
2-minute rebuttal.
Commissioners, I'm Terry Milne from the East Slope Design Review Board. Our action on this project over the last couple of years has to do with design and how it can be improved. And we have houses being built in Bernal constantly with our good advice mostly. And we think that modifications on these 2 buildings beyond what you saw on the slides just now would be very worthwhile for our community, and we'd end up with very nice buildings. This project would be a lot more acceptable all the way around. So that's why we're asking specifically for discretionary review and extra design advice from the planning department. Thank you.
I realize I don't have much time, but I just want to point out that the project sponsor and the lawyer did not address the inaccurate information that exists in this report, and we request the commission to require that accurate data be in the report. Thank you.
My name's Gail Newman. I live at 3574 Folsom Street, and I'm not going to say what I was planning to say because I just want to reject what you just heard about the neighbors not wanting to meet with Mr. Lanoy about my driveway. That is not true. We have not been given any kind of plan about what that would look like. We've had two architects look at what we were given, which in my view was a distorted and misrepresentative visual rendering of what that street and our driveway would look like, and it's not realistic. So we have tried to talk. We at one point tried to have a meeting, and none of that has come to pass. So thank you.
Okay. Project sponsor, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Fabian Lanoy, the project sponsor. I'd just like to respond to Gail Newman, who just said that we've not been able to meet. We've tried to set up meetings with DPW and the neighbors, but DPW has told us that at this point they were not ready to meet with anybody. And we've tried it many times, meet with the neighbors and discuss the driveways with them. They've always told us they didn't want to meet individually. They wanted to meet with the entire neighborhood, which we found through the course of action that it was impossible to meet with all the neighbors as they were extremely hostile in the meetings. And there's no reason in meeting with a group to discuss individual driveways. And we've said everything we can say on those driveways, and we'll continue working with the neighbors through the DPW process. But those are the driveways, and they're not part of the buildings, and there are separate issues that the neighbors will be able to appeal. So we're expecting that will happen, and we'll go through that process. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public hearing, and public comment is closed. Opening up to commissioners, Commissioner Hillis.
So thank you all for coming again to talk about this project. I don't think much has changed in my mind about it. We recognize it's complicated. I mean, I think we addressed that the last time we were here. It's not simple. There's other agencies that have to be involved in designing the roadway, some of these things outside of our purview. The last time we were here, we asked to work more on the design. That could still happen. I think it's moving in the right direction, but I don't think anything. I'd encourage people to get involved in the roadway design process also with DPW in whomever needs to be involved. But I don't think, to me, there's anything new here that would change my vote from the original recommendation to not take discretionary review and approve the project.
Commissioner Moore?
I would echo Commissioner Hillis' sentiment. When we heard this project twice, I believe that this commission used all caution and all technical questions that were raised to get answers which staff together with the other departments prepared. Those were thorough. They were actually supportive of the quantum we were in. And normally DPW does not really actively get involved in projects of this nature at this stage. However, the street is a paper street, which we often have in this commission, and so the process by which this project comes forward seemed very clear. Mr. Sucre, I have a question for you. This has actually never happened before. Is it possible that the CADX could have also just been issued for the roadway by itself, although Environmental Officer Jones chose to package it? Because cumulatively, we never look at speculative projects. That's just not the way you look at impact. However, the street itself could have come forward without the DR request as having a second presentation here, or a third presentation.
Correct. So DPW is able to, they work with our environmental planning division on kind of standard roadway improvements, and so that would have been subject if DPW had chosen to take on the project on their own. So in this case, since the sponsor was involved, it was considered part of the original CADX project, and so hence why the CADX was revised.
Commissioner, you're asking if there was not a proposal for a building here, DPW could have gone forward with a street on their own. Yes, that's right. Yes.
And I mean, I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind, because this commission, in 2 very long hearings, very thoroughly looked at literally every detail with all eyes and ears open to what seemed to be reasonable questions and considerations by the neighbors. However, in totality, I think what was in front of us and what seemed unchanged relative to what I see today, I do not see that any changes to reconsider my position that I held during the last vote in not taking the R and approving the project.
Commissioner Richards.
I guess question for one of the DR requesters, ma'am, on the inaccurate data, please. So in terms of the inaccurate data that you mentioned, what in terms of the inaccurate data would affect the categorical exemption in the EIR?
The categorical exemption actually quotes that, it states that in terms of public views, that the houses, neither house goes above the grade of Bernal Heights Boulevard. This is a fiction that has been consistently left in these DR reports despite our objections.
So the question I have then is, if you read the categorical exemption, it talks about the view not being degraded from the park, not the boulevard.
Right, but actually that is also park property. And I also want to point out that many, you know the park, I know you know the park, but if you go to the park, probably most people enjoy the park by walking around the sidewalk. You know, there are certainly people who exercise their dogs up on Bernal Heights Boulevard, on the hill, and they run around the hill. We've all done that. But for the most part, if you're pushing a stroller, you're jogging. We see it all the time. Tourists come, they walk around the hill. That's how they enjoy the park.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. I guess question for staff. The fact that the boulevard is the way to get in and out of the park, is that considered part of the park? Or is it?
John?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
It would be somewhat unusual that the boulevard itself would be considered a part of the park, but I honestly don't know specifically. So.
Yeah, in terms of how we typically look at public views, what we typically protect are the designated public views that we have identified in the general plan. Mm-hmm. So even the views out from the park, if it's not listed, which this one is not listed in the general plan for, it's not something that is basically regulated basically by our code. So.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that I'm glad I saw was the actual cumulative impact. I was concerned about the piecemealing. There are 4 other lots that they're going to have hookups for gas, electric, water, whatever. And there was a portion here in the categorical exemption that talked about the impact of additional 4 houses, and that would be subject to further review. And I'm satisfied with what I see as well.
Commissioner Hillis.
I'd move to not take TR and approve the project as proposed.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners, on that motion then to not take DR. And approve the project as proposed. Commissioner Hillis.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Commissioners, that'll place us back to your regular calendar on items 12A and B for case numbers 2010.0305 DVA and 2010.01515 DVA, the Sunnydale and Potrero Hope SF Master Plan Project informational presentations.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Theo Miller from the Mayor's Office, the Director of Hope SF. It's with tremendous joy to come before you for this informational hearing on Potrero and Sunnydale, which, alas, is real. I will do a very, very brief background, and apologies for the time confusion. I'm going to need to bounce out after my brief remarks, but we have staff here who can answer any questions. And first, let me say, we have the 4 Hope SF sites in front of you, and part of the reason why it gives us such joy to be in front of you today is that we feel, and I speak on behalf of the mayor who grew up in public housing, that there's no master development more important than Hope SF. And so this really is a moment, and I know the director mentioned issues of equity and displacement, what cities around the country are facing, and I think for us, Hope SF is about repairing promises that we've broken for many, many years. Public policies have created the unacceptable conditions in these 4 communities. We're well under our way in Alice Griffith and in Huntersview, and today marks a critical moment to come before you about Potrero Hill and Sunnydale. I'll just briefly do a little bit of the background and context on Hope SF. I know this is old news to many of you, but just want to make sure for the record folks understand what Hope SF is. And so it is indeed the nation's first public housing transformation and reparations initiative, indeed designed to disrupt intergenerational poverty, to replace public housing with vibrant mixed-income communities without the displacement of any residents, without mass displacement. This comes out of the context of the Hope 6 sites, where we learned our lesson, the vouchers, the porting out of folks. Mayor Newsom launched in many ways this sort of unfunded vision in 2010, and over the course of the last 6 years, through public-private investments, now to the tune of almost a $600 million city investment, we are well on our way. I would say Hope SF is this incredible collection of affordable housing developers, departments, philanthropy, and of course our residents. And so we call it a collective impact initiative. And so much of what I will discuss today is designed to just kind of set the context that I stand here on behalf of dozens and dozens of partners who make this possible. In terms of the community snapshot, just at a glance, 5,000 residents, 2,200 households, incredibly multi-ethnic, multiracial, and you see some of our anchor partners across the 4 sites. We have Bridge Housing and Mercy Housing here today as well that can speak to Potrero and Sunnydale. In terms of what we're trying to do, disrupt the neighborhood effects, again, of the public policies, the years, the decades of disinvestment in the Housing Authority have created. Again, as I mentioned, 5,000 residents across 4 of the most isolated and dilapidated communities in the city. Resilient, amazing, unbelievable families. Unfortunately, 73% of whom are unemployed in a city that has a 3% unemployment rate. $14,000 is the average income in a city that folks make 80 grand. 80% of our households are single parent, and we have unacceptable outcomes with schools and upward mobility. I've given you in your slides just what we call our results-based accountability framework. It indicates our values, and ultimately the goal is to transform these communities, as you know, transform them through and with the residents. It's a mixed-income community transformation initiative, and ultimately we want 90%, 100% of our residents, almost 1,500 folks, to stay and to be able to thrive with the almost $3 billion investment that will happen across Hope SF over the next 15 years. As I go to and I'm going to transition it over to staff, but I'll say just, on behalf of residents, and I spend a lot of my time in community meetings, folks, in some ways in Sunnydale and Potrero still don't believe we're actually going to do this, right? I mean, there's still that doubt and that disbelief. But Hunter's View and Alice Griffith now are guideposts to what we will do. So I thank the Commission for their attention to the work, and as we bring the development agreements and all the work in front of you, it's a citywide endeavor to fulfill many, many old promises. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, President Fong, Commissioners. I'm Matt Snyder of Department Staff. I'm going to talk to you, give you a background of the projects themselves, the master site plans for the projects, and what we hope to see built on the physical side. And then I'm going to turn it over to Lee Latinsky of OEWD, who will talk through the DA. I'll also talk about the design review process that we're looking to institutionalize through this process, similar to other DA projects. And I'm going to skip forward a couple of slides here. No, that's not working. That's not what I'm going to do then. I'm going to. I'll just remind you where we've been so far. You've seen these projects several times over the years. In 2015, in July, and in December, you certified the environmental impact reports for Sunnydale and Potrero, respectively. Also, in December, we did a couple of other additional actions. We adopted CEQA findings for Potrero, along with general plan findings. That was to enable a portion of the site, what we refer to as Block X, to move forward prior to the rest of the project. We also did an informational about a year ago, and then, of course, last month I was before you to initiate the general plan amendments. And so we will be before you again next month. Here is a list of the actions that you will take. I will actually come back to this slide, but I did want to run through some of the general characteristics again of these sites and how we look to transform them. SF strategies in terms of the physical side of things, again, is what we're looking to do is increase the densities. These are largely well underdeveloped sites, given that they're underlying zoning, to leverage the additional density, to integrate it with the neighborhoods. They're very insular as they are now, improve the connectivity, provide a mix of both uses, not just the predominantly residential that is there now, and along with mixed incomes within the neighborhoods. So if we look to apply this to Sunnydale, and Sunnydale, again, is located in the Visitation Valley. It's surrounded by McLaren Park and Amazon Playground. Currently, it's characterized, built in 1939. This site is characterized by 6 large superblock projects, about 80 buildings. These large, very wide, low-slung buildings initially constructed for workforce housing in 1939. They are configured perpendicular to the streets that are curvilinear. They don't have what we call eyes on the streets, and a lot of infrastructure that is lacking. In the bottom right, you'll notice streets without sidewalks, for example. And looking to transform them into a regular street grid with buildings that align the street with setbacks, consistent street walls, assuring that we have active uses along the streets that well define the street, make sure that there's good eyes on the streets. Here's the site plan for Sunnydale now. Again, 6 super blocks, curvilinear streets, not connected to the neighborhood. and then what we plan to transform it towards. A regular street block, I think around 36 fine grain blocks, replacing the 6 super blocks. New addition, about 4 additional parks that will not only provide recreational opportunities for the residents and local neighbors, but also is designed to tie into the regional open space network. So in the end, we're going to look to, again, we're going, in terms of land uses, on top of the physical characteristics that I just described, we're looking to add retail and other community facilities to make sure that it's more mixed use as well as more mixed income. And here's the project. Now, you've probably seen this graphic many times, but this is what the site looks like now, and then what Hope SF plans to transform the site into. And then doing the same for Potrero, we're going to travel northward up to Potrero Hill. The Hope SF Potrero site, commonly referred to now as Potrero Terrace and Annex. It has all of the similar characteristics that I described for Sunnydale, but it is also characterized by a particularly steep slope, again disconnected from the rest of the neighborhood. Again, looking to transform it into a more typical street network with an open space network. Here, Potrero also looks to take advantage of things that are typical of Potrero, specifically the steep slope sites, to kind of be able to use that for the open space, incorporate in the open space, and also the perpendicular parking that you see Potrero Hill is also carried forward into the neighborhood. And here is the Potrero site as it is now, and as the city plans to transform it to. Again, introducing mixed income, mixed uses, adding additional parks that not only are great to have in themselves, but help complete the overall area open space network. And the same graphics. So let's talk about what's going to be before you and what the planning department's role is going to be in this. So next month we will have before you general plan amendments that we had presented to you last month, specifically a couple of the maps in the urban design elements and the open space and recreation elements. I should just also back up and say we're modeling what we're going to be doing here with the Hope SF project very similarly to what we did for Schleglock and Park Merced, other large-scale development agreements. That is, so we're going to create a special use district for each of these sites, specifically for these sites. Most of the controls will essentially refer to a separate document that'll be site-specific design standards and guidelines documents. That will be before you. That'll be a document for this body to approve only. We will also, of course, be doing map amendments that will similarly adjust the heights. Right now, they're both limited to 40 feet, and we wanted to make this area more urban, take advantage of the low density to bump up the density. And finally, we will be here for Sunnydale. We did CEQA findings. We did CEQA finding motion from you along with general plan findings and Planning Code 101 findings. We will be doing that for Sunnydale as well. So, as I noted, we'll have a special use district for each of the sites. Each of them will essentially refer most of the controls over to the design controls and guidelines documents, one for each. They're very, very similar in content and in format. I should say that the way we're organizing this are pretty much identical across the two sites, hopefully to limit to make it as simple as possible. And so the design review process is going to be different from what we typically do at the planning department, where we're generally mostly involved with reviewing projects for structures or buildings on private lots. Here, this is going to be much more multifaceted, and again, similarly with Schleglock and with Park Merced will have, it'll be, our review in nature will be both vertical and horizontal. Within that structure, I should mention that instead of doing 311 notifications that we typically do, we'll have a requirement in the development agreement that both project sponsors be on sort of a continually doing outreach and engagement to the community, and then we'll have making sure that at least so many, one meeting happens prior to certain applications as they come in. The phase application is something that the planning department will look at prior to looking at applications for design review for buildings. And this is to assure that as they phase their application, as they phase their project, buildings and blocks are being designed in conjunction with the streets, of course. This gives us an opportunity to make sure that there is sufficient amount of infrastructure that they're pursuing at the same time with their buildings, with their structures. At the same time, we're going to build into this process we'll be reaching out to the implementing agencies who will later then be looking at applications for infrastructure improvements. This will give them a heads up and an opportunity to provide comments to the project sponsors early if need be. And then we'll do a design review, vertical. This will be most typical to what we do in planning. Review of buildings. We'll be reviewing against these design standards and guidelines documents. And within that, there'll be provisions for enabling minor modifications and major modifications depending on the severity of what they're asking for. Major modifications will come before you for your discretion. And then we'll also be doing design review for community improvements, most specifically the parks and community facilities. And designs for streets will actually be taken care of by Department of Public Works, with planning, of course, having a very major role in that, but they will be the coordinating of that. We will be the first to review street designs, making sure that they're consistent with what we have in the design guidelines and standards documents. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lita Tinsky of OEWD, who can talk through with you the development agreement.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lee Lutensky. I'm with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. So the last piece of the master approval package that will be before you next month is the development agreement. And as you know, a development agreement is a contractual tool that the city can employ to achieve a set of public benefits over and above what could be required by normal zoning processes. And in return gives the developer a vested right to develop the project over a specified term. And so the DA is an essential tool for Hope SF, Sunnydale, and Potrero. It will provide valuable certainty that the city's Hope SF initiatives can be implemented with clear upfront expectations, timelines, and roles and responsibilities for every party. In addition, the city will retain long-term control to ensure that there is an appropriate rollout of the public benefits over time and by phase. And I know you are familiar with development agreements, but as you can probably guess, these Hope SF DAs are fairly unique. They memorialize the city's and the developers' mutual commitment to achieving the ambitious goals of Hope SF, which Theo spoke about. And the city, in addition to its traditional regulatory role in this case, is really a true partner in these projects. The city will be providing capital funding. The city will be playing a very active role in coordinating among all of our departments, especially our infrastructure departments, to realize this master plan. And the city will also, with the leadership of the Mayor's Office of Housing, be working with our state and federal housing partners to obtain grants and subsidies to make this project happen. And then the final piece I'll mention is that the developers and their role is unique here as well. As a reminder, Bridge Housing is leading the development of the Potrero site, and the partnership of Mercy Housing and related companies is leading the development of the Sunnydale site. These developers have a unique role of being mission-driven developers. Unlike some of the other folks that come before you to do important projects, these developers truly share the main goal of the city in rehousing the city's most vulnerable residents throughout this project. And so the package, sort of the set of public benefits and the set of what this project will achieve is really, again, primarily revolves around that main important benefit, which is we will rehouse the existing over 1,300 households living across both of these sites. They will have new, safe, clean households to live in. Additionally, these neighborhoods will ultimately be mixed income. The developers will provide additional new affordable, low-income affordable tax credit units on the sites. There will also be opportunities for new market rate housing, again, to create that mixed income community. And as you've heard from Matt, both projects include significant in-kind benefits in that they are creating these brand new neighborhoods. So that includes a number of neighborhood open spaces across both of the sites. They will be well designed and programmed such that they are safe for the residents to use, which is not something they have today. It will also include the construction of new roadways, utility infrastructure, connections, and transit improvements, all of which will greatly enhance the residents and the new residents' connectivity to the neighborhood and accessibility to actually relate to their broader districts. And then finally, the benefits that these projects will provide are much needed neighborhood services. So there will be retail, there will be street activity, there will be community facilities, child care centers, and social service outlets. And I'm just going to quickly go through the last slide here. The project phasing will be done over 10 to 20 years. These DAs specifically will include flexibility in the timing and the order of the phasing, and that's in order to be responsive to allow the city and the developers to work together to go after funding opportunities and grants. And so the phasing is flexible to allow for that, and also, of course, to be respectful of the residents currently living on the site who all need to be relocated. I have a list of the funding sources here. We can happily talk about that in Q&A if you'd like. And so just in closing, I'd say that we'll be back before you November 17th, seeking approval of the master entitlements package. We will also be visiting other boards and commissions for approval of the DA as well. We hope to be before the Board of Supervisors early 2017. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, if that concludes staff presentation, opening it up to public comment. Not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Johnson.
Sure. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Really looking forward to, we've already had many discussions on the EIR. We've had a couple presentations on that, and really looking forward to actually seeing some approvals and coming before us. This is a very exciting project for a lot of reasons. There were a lot of inequities in how public housing both was physically and sort of socially sited, and this is going to help to really to change that dynamic. And so it's really exciting to be a part of that. One thing that I wanted to ask staff, and then just make sure that we get it on the record on the DAs. These are a little bit, the development agreements here are a little bit different than development agreements that we've seen for other major projects, 5M being like the most recent one, in that these DAs don't really include what you might think of as community benefits that we've seen in some other projects. So a little bit of a different reason for having these. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think traditionally what a development agreement does is sort of seeks to, while entitling a developer to build more and perhaps increase densities, in return get a significant package of public benefits. Financial contributions usually are included in terms of paying impact fees and really creating kind of a whole host of benefits for the public. In this case, as you know, the city is funding these projects, so there's sort of a circular loop where we're clearly not exacting things from these developers in terms of extra financial impact fees or payments or things like that. But what we are using this development agreement for, and what it is a critical tool for, is to actually sort of lay all of the commitments on the table and make sure all the parties have a clear outlook about how we're actually going to implement this plan. Because what the DA will have is a specified phasing plan that talks about, how the funding agreements will come together to make each phase move forward. It will have controls, as Matt went over, of what types of community amenities need to be included. And so it really is a tool in this case to, I think, kind of put on paper a very real and binding commitment that the city and these developers are coming together to realize the project, and also a coordination mechanism for the city, because the city is actually very involved in these projects. It touches many, many departments, and so actually just assembling this development agreement has caused all of our departments to sit at the table together, get together. How are we actually installing all this new utility work? How are we doing this transit infrastructure? It's really been a good tool already and will continue to help us frame the implementation.
Okay, excellent. I would just add one other comment as we start to move towards seeing actual future approvals coming to the commission. One of the major issues that we've seen in some of our other really large developments, if you think about like the eastern neighborhoods where it's sort of piecemeal, but it's a large area, and there's many different work streams and changes that are happening in the neighborhood, and you could think of Hope SF as a microcosm of that, where you're sort of totally redoing certain neighborhoods and doubling or tripling their density and reorganizing streets, and there's a lot that's happening. And what I really want to make sure we avoid is that 10 years from now, when some of us are still on the commission, we're not getting the public comment about how the streets are there, but there are no buses, or the buses are coming, but the parks aren't there. And so it would be really great. I know that some of this, it's a little challenging, right? Because these are citywide, and also it's a public-private partnership. To really be aware of what that phasing agreement's going to be. I know it's going to be in the DA, but to make sure that it's sort of highlighted along with every piece of approval that we're doing. So when we do the design development documents, like really make sure that the phasing is highlighted so that there's just an overall picture of when things are going to happen, and we can have a holistic view of how these developments are going to come together and really work, number one, for the public housing residents that we planned, to be able to return and live there, and also the new residents.
Commissioner Milgar.
I just had a question. I guess it's for Theo. I'm so happy to see this and that it's in this, this far along. It's so wonderful. I am wondering, development agreements are really complicated things, and I'm wondering what the process has been with the residents to understand what is in there, and particularly the phasing, what Christine was talking about. Transportation, schools, there's all sorts of things. These are neighborhoods that have some of the highest concentrations of kids in the city, and there's a whole host of things that happens to families, when so much is disruptive. So I'm just wondering what the process has been.
So it's a great question. And so was mentioned is the mission-driven component of our affordable housing developers. And so those affordable housing developers are on site already at both Sunnydale and Potrero. They're co-located there. They host community building meetings monthly with the residents. Any construction documents, design documents, phasing documents are made available to the residents. So I would say that the DA and the MDA haven't yet sort of been passed out to the residents. I don't know if they will or if they would dare want to read those, but there is a mechanism in place so that all of the key items, all the key terms, the ways in which the phasing is done, washer and dryers, buses, all of the hot button items, and in many ways that's my office's obligation to make sure that that feedback loop happens. So our developers do that. And I'll also say that we have a resident leadership council that I'll be taking the legal documents directly to even get an even deeper dive into those documents.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hillis.
So thank you all for your work on this project and the presentation. I mean, I know how important it is to rehab these units and build new affordable units and market rate units and correct some of the planning mistakes that were made in developing the original projects. Just some general questions on the DA. I know we'll get into it later, but the underlying land ownership, it's the housing authority, I imagine now. What happens to that in the future? Is it shift to the various nonprofit?
So yes, the current landowner of both sites is the San Francisco Housing Authority. We are concurrently working on a set of sort of associated agreements with the Housing Authority, and that will be called a Master Development Agreement. And that document has really two main purposes. One is to really specify specific relocation details. The other is to really outline the land transfers that will happen to make this development possible. And so ultimately what will happen is, at the end of the day, the final picture will be all of the new streets and public right-of-ways will be dedicated to the city. So the city will now own all of the streets just like they do everywhere else. The affordable parcels will actually, that are newly created, will actually retain Housing Authority underlying ownership. They will be ground leased to the developers. The developers will own the improvements. So the developers will own the buildings and manage those buildings on behalf of the authority. And then the sort of the third piece is there will be new market rate parcels created. Those parcels will be actually just sold to independent third-party developers. And the part of the funding scheme, of course, is the proceeds from the sale of those parcels will help fund the rest of the project. And so it really will be a patchwork.
Okay. In the market rate parcels, they'll be sold, not necessarily developed by the affordable housing developer,
That's
the
right.
nonprofit. They could be market rate developers that build those.
That's right.
And is there a term to the DA? I guess, I mean, what happens at the end? I guess the underlying ownership remains the same, and the affordable parcels and remain publicly owned.
Yes.
Similar to, I guess, what happens now with affordable housing.
Yeah, the zoning controls and the ownership will last beyond the term of the DA.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Moore.
I think this is a special day. It is before the EIR was approved that some of us already said in the many years of reviewing the very, very careful development of the master plans, which ultimately became the basis for the EIR. And there is a lot of creative and powerful work in which the Commission in the past reviewed these plans and kind of tweaked them, asked questions, etc. And they have, I think, a depth by which I'm really, really happy to support of where you are and how you're going about realizing the plan. It has been a long time coming. Mr. Snyder has been holding the torch high, including a number of other people whose faces I recognize here, and thank you to all of you. If I would be in your shoes, I would be really proud of having been part of this. I'm proud of this as a commissioner, having been allowed to observe, comment, and tweak, in some comments at least, of what happened here. And I couldn't be more appreciative that this is happening right now. I think the city is shining a beacon to others who are struggling, as Director Williams said earlier, with the impossibility of addressing the issue of housing, need for affordable housing, which is not just a national, but it's an international problem. Having said that, I would remind myself, and it was echoed a little bit by what Commissioner Johnson said, we were always concerned, particularly when we heard the SFMTA improvement plans, that public transportation and the increase and variety of public transportation stay abreast with densifying this area. From what has been an island and has more become an island over the past decades, this particular project needs to be fully reintegrated into the overall functioning fabric of the city. And that is making all and every transportation mode available, from bikeways to whatever it all is. And I'm not trying to do pie in the sky talk here. I leave that up to Mr. Alpert to help us a little bit. But this needs some very, very strong and upfront commitment in that infrastructure by which it ties these sites back to the city. We had the same discussions in Park Merced, where we have 19th Avenue and BART serving an increased density. And on the visitation Schlager, we had 3rd Street and the further expansion and strengthening of the light rail going in that direction. We don't have a lot of that kind of stuff out here. So for us to follow the phasing and the real focus on high priority infrastructure will make this project great. It would be nice, perhaps, Director Graham, if in just some brief way, with the help of perhaps Mr. Snyder, this commission could briefly go over some of the master plan issues, including the phasing part, because a lot of thought has already gone into it. How do you complete a city fabric which is broken, and on and on and on. It might be a great idea to give them the benefit of these really mature plans. So I'm just really happy for you. Congratulations.
Okay, I think that concludes commissioner comments. And Jonas, I think we are on to the next item.
The only other item is general public comment.
That's what I was hoping to hear. Is there any general public comment today?
Hello, my name is Sylvia Johnson. My general public is for high estimations for light wells to, be tracking emotions. And my tracking with your the visual numbers is different than, like on different set sketches, which when the steam, what I was already wrote now for this, for reconsidering and rolling and tracking is the wheels that has steam that does put out the census for the for this, and to not to have any light rails to go into damages. And far as the numbers that you have on this, high rolling for passes that go into railing and tracking, as I'm going to school for it, as math is one of the real important things about, these high economics of railroad and tracking that has to be done with a very some light precisions and others might be heavy. And I did the different ways that we put on the steam that is newer, and it might cost a lot of money to do this process. But this also goes along with doing the regular mathematicians with this tracking, and it is on different rolling and light perspectives too, and a more designed parts of more a way of easier railing and tracking, which is done here with different perspectives, which is not safety, and it's not really in this design to, make it where public could be safe. And that's what I was trying, establish. Of course, this does have a lot to do with schooling. I'm trying to
Thank
do.
you, Sylvia. Your time is up.
Okay, is there any additional public comment? Okay, not seeing any public comment is closed, and the meeting is adjourned.